Okay, um, now that we've covered Hesiod and the world of patriarchy, I want to go back to discussing feminist Jungian psychology. And earlier I talked about Jung, the assimilation of the shadow, the hero myth, the animus anima, and then his idea of individuation. Um, he's been criticized as this is more male than female, or it's about the animus, how to assimilate the animus, whereas the myth of Eros and Psyche is about how to assimilate anima, or the nurturing instinct, the creative instinct, which would tend to apply more to women than men. And so the first part of this paper is a standard version of the Eros and Psyche myth, along with the interpretations of two archetypal psychologists and then my own, about the important insights we gain from reflecting upon the story. The second part describes the seven sacred passions for women as they are realized in patriarchy. And really, this should be compared to Carolyn Spretneck's view of how they existed in the pre-Hellenic goddess era. And then the third part of the paper is readings of ancient myths and recent literary work that describes women who are possessed by one of the seven goddesses, sometimes negatively and sometimes positively. So, this is my tribute to the women's movement and all of the new perspective that they gave to culture. When I was younger, I did not um, realize how much they'd done. I didn't realize how big the problem was. And now I want to just have my tribute to the women who are older than I, who did quite a bit to create some cultural space where women were less invisible and were engaging in showing showing men and women the harm that they do. So in a lot of ways, they were acting as a bard, the way that Hesiod was. He was showing men the harm they do to women, and these women are showing the harm that's been done to them. They're speaking out, and instead of having a man speak for them. Okay, Psyche was the third daughter of a king and the most beautiful. The god Eros fell in love with her and took her away to a paradise on earth. However, he came to her only at night, in the dark, and demanded that she not ask him to reveal himself to her. Her sisters goaded her into finding out the truth. One night she held up a candle to see him. He woke up and ran away. In order to get him back, Aphrodite, god of beauty and partner to Eros, assigned her 4 tasks. First, she was set beside a huge mountain of seeds and told she must sort them overnight. This was impossible for her, but the birds came and helped her, so she finished the task. Second, she was forced to get some of the wool from the golden fleece, a pack of rams. So she did so by watching where the rams were. When they left, she gathered some of the wool that had rubbed off on the branches of the trees. Third, she had to get water from a pure spring at the top of a mountain, a strange spring that ran both up and down in a circle. An eagle offered to help her, giving her a bucket and flying her over the spring to fill the bucket. Fourth, she had to go to Hades and get some special perfume from Persephone, goddess of the underworld. After a long journey with many obstacles and dangers, she managed to get it. Eros finally returned. In relation to the first task, sorting the seeds, Robert Johnson, an archetypal psychologist, focuses on the physical activity of sorting. Quote, in so many of the practical matters of life, in the running of a household, for example, or its parallel in a professional life, the challenge is to make form and order prevail. Without that essential task of establishing form, there would be chaos. Jean Bolen focuses on the internal sorting involved when making choices about how to live. Quote, when a woman makes a crucial decision, she often must first sort out a jumble of conflicted feelings and competing loyalties. Sorting the seeds is then an inward task, requiring that a woman look honestly within, sift through her feelings, values, and motives, and separate what is truly important from what is insignificant. On my view, the sorting refers to reflecting upon one's childhood, sorting out which people and events were most influential in the formation of one's psyche. This sorting corresponds to Jung's description of the task of a 20-year-old to recognize his or her complexes. Only then can a person make the transition from being driven by unexamined emotions and ways of living to seeing oneself through the lens of the collective unconscious. One can move from the particular to the universal, from drives that seem purely unique to an understanding of oneself as living out patterns in the collective unconscious. When this transition is made, one is able and willing to learn from religious texts that educate the soul through images and stories of the soul's journey toward wisdom, Jung's individuation. The second task, gathering some of the golden fleece of the rams, refers to every woman's need to find a spot in the public realm, the world dominated by men in a patriarchal society. In relation to this task, Johnson says, quote, masculinity often looks ram-like to a woman when it comes time for her to assimilate a little of that quality into her interior life. She must make her way through it. She fears that she will be killed, bludgeoned to death, or depersonalized by the ram nature of the patriarchal, competitive, impersonal society in which we live. Johnson thinks that, quote, the psyche myth tells us that a woman can obtain the necessary masculine energy for her purposes without a power play. Bolen agrees that, quote, symbolically, the golden fleece represents power, which a woman needs to acquire without being destroyed in the attempt to gain some. However, Bolen distinguishes between different types of women, represented by the different archetypes in Greek myth, in the way women accomplish this task. Quote, an armored Athena can be in the midst of a battlefield, directly involved in strategy and politics, but a woman who is like Psyche does better observing, waiting, and gradually acquiring power indirectly. The act of acquiring the golden fleece without destroying Psyche is a metaphor for the task of gaining power and remaining a compassionate person. In my view, Psyche represents the anima force in every psyche. All archetypal psychologists agree that a wise person balances the forces of the anima, the female energies of compassion and connectedness, and the forces of the animus, the male energies of aggression and competitiveness. The story tells of how anyone, male or female, can gain power without butting heads with other people. It encourages human beings to avoid unnecessary confrontation, to find alternative ways to exercise power in situations that demand power. The goal is to avoid losing one's soul or one's mind, the drive to weave people together and create a culture. The third task is filling a goblet with water from the Styx, the river that runs from the mountain into the earth and back again. Psyche is helped by Zeus, who asks an eagle to take the goblet and fill it up for her. On some versions of the myth, the eagle picks her up and she dips the cup into the river. I prefer the second version because in it, Psyche herself sees the world from a broader point of view. Johnson interprets this task as telling us how the woman must relate to the vastness of life. She may take only one goblet of water. The feminine way is to do one thing and do it well and in proportion. She's not denied a second or third or 10th activity, but she must take it one goblet at a time, each in good order. It is not clear in Johnson's book, however, if he claims that the myth is written for women only, or for the development of the anima in a man. After referring to the woman and the feminine way, Johnson goes on to say, the The feminine aspect of the human psyche has been described as unfocused consciousness. The feminine nature is flooded with the rich vastness of possibilities in life and is drawn to all of them, usually all at once. Vision like an eagle to see clearly and dip into the river at the right place in the right manner is important. The ego that is attempting to raise some of the vast unconscious into human conscious life must learn to contain only one goblet of water at a time, lest it be overwhelmed and the container shattered. Johnson's conclusion is that everyone, male and female, has to learn to see both the big picture and the immediate task at hand. Almost every person is overwhelmed by the too muchness of modern life, even on a day-to-day basis. That is the time for the eco view and the one goblet at a time mentality. Bolen has a similar view. Quote, the eagle symbolizes the ability to see the landscape from a distant perspective and swoop down to grasp what is needed. This is not the usual perspective mode for a woman such as Psyche, who is so personally involved that she cannot see the forest for the trees. It's also difficult to tell if Bolen thinks the story applies only to women or to the development of the anima aspect of a man's psyche. My own view is that the water from the Sphinx is holy, pure water. It represents the sacred tasks in life. The deities of Greek mythology represent archetypes of many different sacred callings, many human activities that give life meaning and purpose. Adults must engage in as many of these as possible in the course of their lives in order to pass down to posterity a livable world. The tasks are related to marriage, reproduction, creating just communities through the creation of laws and institutions, using reasoning powers to manage those communities, respecting the natural world, artistic creation and appreciation, scientific inquiry, overcoming immediate pleasures and fearful situations in order to protect and preserve what is most important, etc. These sacred duties can be overwhelming. No one can focus on all of them at once. A life dedicated to the pursuit of what is most sacred in human life will involve both the ego point of view and the ability to know what particular choices are most likely to lead to success in the pursuit of the most long-term goals. I think Johnson and Bolen would agree. The fourth task is to go to Hades and get the cask of beauty ointment from Persephone. When Psyche completes this task, Zeus allows her to drink from the pot of immortality and promises her that Eros will never leave her again. Psyche later gives birth to a daughter named Pleasure. Johnson says the cask represents to each woman your own archetypal nature, that which is beyond any personal dimension. You then participate in the immortality which has been promised from the very beginning of the myth, although in such dark and difficult terms. It was Psyche's work which translated the native beauty promised at first into the conscious goddesshood accomplished at the end of the story. Bolen says, through the four tasks, Psyche evolves. She develops capabilities and strengths as her courage and determination are tested. Yet, despite all she acquires, her basic nature and priorities remain unchanged. She values a love relationship, risks everything for it, and wins. My own view is that the myth is the story of a woman's life and loves, of all the sacred passions women are capable of experiencing, as represented by the archetypes of the Greek goddesses. In relation to each one, a woman who seeks wisdom has to go through the four stages described in the myth. She must examine the seeds planted from childhood that lead her to seek or avoid one of the goddesses, or to live out this passion in a way very different from the ways other women do. She must gain power in the public realm in relation to each passion if she is to leave behind the fruit of her sacred labor. She must be able to see which passion should be pursued, and or what combination at any given time, in what way, for how long, etc. The different passions have to be guided by the ego vision of a complete human life, the individuation of the self, which must include all the sacred tasks. Finally, she must learn how to be both serious and deep and spontaneous. She must take great pleasure in the pursuit of wisdom, not repressing irrational desires or detaching reasoning from emotions and actions. All aspects of life are integrated. The most instinctual drives, which is the underworld, are transformed into a great passion, a great pleasure, in the serious search for meaning and purpose. In the rest of this part of the paper, I will discuss the 7 goddesses of Greek mythology, because each represents one of the sacred passions alluded to above. Although I think the story relates to men as well as women, I will discuss the goddesses in relation to women's lives. I will use quotes about the strengths and weaknesses of each goddess taken from Bolen's book, Goddesses in Every Woman. Artemis was the daughter of Zeus and Leto, a nature deity, and the twin sister of Apollo, god of reason. She spent her days in the wilderness, accompanied by virgin nymphs and hunting. Quote, in the nymphs, Artemis acted swiftly in the myths and decisively to protect and rescue those who appealed to her for help. She was also quick to punish those who offended her. Artemis is a personification of an independent feminine spirit. The archetype she represents enables a woman to seek her own goals on terrain of her own choosing. This archetype enables a woman to feel whole without a man. With it, she can pursue interests and work at what matters to her without needing masculine approval. The Artemis archetype gives women the innate ability to concentrate intensely on whatever is important to her and to be undistracted from her course, either by the needs of others or by competition from others. Unquote. Athena, by contrast, spends all of her time in the city, focusing on running her city justly. Quote, Athena was the stately, beautiful warrior goddess, protector of her chosen heroes and of her namesake city, Athens, protector of cities, patron of military forces, and goddess of weavers, goldsmiths, potters, and dressmakers. Bolen says that psychologically, the martial and domestic skills associated with Athena involve planning and execution, activities that require purposeful thinking. Strategy, practicality, and tangible results are hallmarks of her particular wisdom. Athena values rational thinking and stands for the domination of will and intellect over instinct and nature. Her spirit is found in the city. Politically, besides championing individual heroes and being the Olympian position closest to Zeus, Athena sided with the patriarchy. Even though she defends the status quo and appears to identify with men, Bolen says Athena is a feminine archetype. She shows that thinking well, keeping one's head in the heart of an emotional situation, and developing good tactics in the midst of conflict are natural traits for some women. Athena's realistic orientation to the world as it is, her pragmatic attitude, her conformity to adult, that is, traditionally held standards, and lack of romanticism or idealism complete this impression of Athena as the epitome of the sensible adult. Diplomacy, which involves strategy, power, and deceptive maneuvers, is a realm in which Athena shines. In her leisure time, Athena continues to use analogous skills in the production of tapestries. As goddess of crafts, Athena was involved with making things that were both useful and aesthetically pleasing. She was most noted for her skills as a weaver, in which hands and mind must work together. To make a tapestry or a weaving, a woman must design and plan what she will do, and then, row by row, methodically create it. This approach is an expression of the Athena archetype, which emphasizes foresight, planning, mastery of a craft, and patience. And I will add that the tapestry is also, Athena is weaving together cloth, and then in her capacity as a leader, she's weaving together people. She's also weaving together different city-states, different nations in diplomacy. And then a tapestry also can tell a story. So she's weaving the story of a city together. Okay. Aphrodite. Aphrodite is extremely different from Artemis or Athena, although in a patriarchal society Aphrodite gets associated almost exclusively with the projection of male lust and with a woman's ability to sexually arouse a man. This is a serious perversion of Aphrodite as an archetype of a woman's psyche. Since it is a female archetype, built in the female psyche, it consists in the capacity to arouse pleasure and inspire creativity, including pregnancies of mind, body, and spirit. Although a great deal of artistic and creative work is the result of planning and drudgery, no artist would engage in such work if he or she had not originally been inspired by an Aphrodite passion to create something beautiful in some sense of beautiful. Without Aphrodite as the original spark and a constant source of heat to keep the creative process from going cold or burning out, nothing would be created. The Aphrodite archetype represents the transformative and creative power of love and makes clear that this kind of love does not exclusively or even primarily refer to sexual attraction. Anyone who's ever fallen in love with a person, a place, an idea, or an object focuses on and take it in focuses on it and takes it in with Aphrodite consciousness. Hera, let's see. Bolen explains, whoever or whatever Aphrodite imbues with beauty is irresistible. A magnetic attraction results. Chemistry happens between the two, and they desire union above all else. While this drive may be purely sexual, the impulse is often deeper, representing an urge that's both psychological consummation, may speak of an urge toward completion or perfection. Union is to join together as one, and to know is really to understand one another. So, in the Greek, there's an attraction between the knower and the knowable. So, there's a passion for science, is a natural passion. It's an attraction between the universe that's knowable and our capacity to know. The desire to know and be known is what Aphrodite generates. If this desire leads to physical intimacy, impregnation of a new life may follow. If the union is also or either of mind, heart, or spirit, new growth occurs in the psychological, emotional, or spiritual spheres. So Hesiod's understanding that people need justice would mean that he falls in love with justice and falls in love with trying to create a good set of laws. People can become really passionate in this attraction, be really attracted to trying to meet a human need. They're okay. Intercourse is synonymous with communication or communion. Any of the other Greek goddess archetypes can be attracted to Aphrodite. In order for the sacred passion each represents to be activated and activated toward a positive goal, they must be united with the sacred Aphrodite. Hera is the wife of Zeus, and the archetype that Bolen says, quote, provides the capacity to bond, to be loyal and faithful, to endure and go through difficulties with a partner. The marriage bond has three aspects, all of which Hera recognizes: the inner need to be a mate, the need for recognition as a married pair, and the human need to understand the marriage bond as sacred, a spiritual union or sacrament through which grace can be channeled. Unquote. At its deepest level, psychological level, the sanctity of marriage represents, quote, an intra-psychic union between masculine and feminine, an experience of wholeness. Unquote. At best, the Hera archetype, then, represents the union of nature, her foster parents, and culture, her status as the goddess of marriage, and the union of female energies in the psyche and male energies in the psyche. Like the story of Aphrodite, the story of Hera describes a culture corrupted by the male abuse of power. Hera's archetype has two different aspects. She was solemnly revered and worshipped in rituals as a powerful goddess of marriage, and was denigrated by Homer as a vindictive, quarrelsome, jealous shrew. Hera, as goddess of marriage, was revered and reviled, honored and humiliated. She, more than any other goddess, has markedly positive and negative attributes. The same is true for the Hera archetype, an intensely powerful force for joy or pain in a woman's psyche. Hera's reputation as a shrew was a direct result of Zeus's infidelity. Time and time again, Zeus was unfaithful, evoking vindictive jealousy in his betrayed wife. Hera's rage was not aimed at her unfaithful husband. Rather, it was directed at the other woman, who more often than not had been seduced, raped, or deceived by Zeus, at children conceived by Zeus, or at innocent bystanders. And again, I'm trying to say this is a catharsis. This is guys trying to educate guys about what not to do and why. This is abusive toward women. The women you rape, the wife you cheat on, and it creates so many problems. So, again, it matters that Hera's characteristics were cause, they're the effect of Zeus's behavior, because in a patriarchy, men are the ones who start the fight. Hera had two sets of parents. The first, Kronos and Rhea, were a distant father who swallowed his children, threatened by the possibility that one would overthrow him, and a powerless mother who could not protect her children from them, unquote. Bolen points out that this is an archetype for one form of extremely dysfunctional marriage, with a domineering father who controls his whole family, and a passive mother who cannot confront him. After being freed from her father, she was raised in an idyllic situation with two nature deities as foster parents. In this family, a well-formed Hera archetype is healthy and happy and plays an important part in the union of culture and nature. However, after marrying Zeus, she found herself in the same situation, married to a man who abused her and her children. Like her mother, she was unable to confront him. Unlike mortals, Hera is never able to divorce her husband and start over again. That's why the archetypes, the deities, are really about complexes, and they never change. But human beings can learn from those stories and change. Demeter is the goddess of fertility, both fertility of the earth and fertility of nature. Demeter was the second child of Kronos and Rhea. Zeus, another child of Kronos and Rhea, raped his sister Demeter, leading to the birth of Persephone. Hades, god of the underworld, was attracted to Persephone and asked Zeus if he could abduct her. Zeus approved. Feeling betrayed, Demeter's grief turned to outrage. She withdrew from Mount Olympus and refused to allow anything to grow. Demeter would not do anything until Persephone was returned to her. Finally, a deal was made. Persephone spends 6 months in Hades and 6 months with her mother, and the earth once again becomes fertile. As an archetype in the souls of women, Demeter represents maternal instinct, fulfilled through pregnancy or through providing physical, psychological, or spiritual nourishment to others. When Demeter is the strongest archetype in a woman's psyche, being a mother is the most important role and function in her life. The nurturing aspect of the Demeter archetype can also be expressed through the helping professions, teaching, nursing, counseling, in any job in which helping others is part of the role, and in any relationship in which she can be a nurturing person. The archetype is not restricted to being a mother, unquote. As mothers, Demeter women are obsessively focused on meeting not only the physical needs of their children, but also providing emotional support and understanding, quote, spiritual wisdom as spiritual wisdom as they cope with disappointments and grief or seek to find something meaningful in life. As an archetype in a woman's soul, and then there's Persephone. As an archetype in a woman's soul, Persephone predisposes a woman not to act, but to be acted on by others, to be compliant in action and passive in attitude. She has two aspects, as the Cora, nameless maiden, and as queen of the underworld. She represents the young girl who does not know who she is. She's uncommitted to a relationship, to work, or to an educational goal, even though she may in fact be in a relationship, have a job, or be in college or even graduate school. In a patriarchy, such women often get used and abused by men, sexually or psychologically. Finally, Hestia was the goddess of the hearth, or more specifically, of the fire burning on a round hearth. She's the least known of the Olympians. She was not represented in human form by painters or sculptors. Instead, she was felt to be present in the living frame at the center of the home, temple, and city. Hestia's symbol was a circle. Hestia was apparently a spiritually felt presence, as well as a sacred fire that provided illumination, warmth, and heat for food. Zeus has her sit in the center of the house to receive the best in offerings. In all temples of the gods she's honored, and among all mortals she's a venerated goddess. As an archetype in a woman's soul, says Bolen, Hestia's way of perceiving is by looking inward and intuitively sensing what is going on. The Hestian mode allows us to get in touch with our values by bringing into focus what is personally meaningful. Through this inner focusing, we can perceive the essence of a situation. We can also gain insight into other people's character and see the pattern or feel the significance of their actions. This inner perspective provides clarity in the midst of the confusing myriad of details that confront our five senses. The inward Hestia may also become emotionally detached and perceptually inattentive to others in her surroundings as she attends to her own concerns. Hestia's one in herselfness seeks quiet tranquility, which is most easily found in solitude. With Hestia as an inner presence, a woman is not attached to people, outcomes, possessions, prestige, or power. She feels whole as she is. Her ego is not on the line. Because her identity isn't important, it's not tied to external circumstance. Thus, she does not become elated or devastated by whatever happens. The Hestia archetype represents the kind of psychic energy that Jung describes as the inner life of an individuated person, the person who has attained the highest level of wisdom. Hestia's detachment gives this archetype a wise woman quality. She's like an elder who's seen it all and has come through with her spirit undampened and her character tempered by experience. Hestia is an archetype of inner centeredness. She's the still point that gives meaning to activity, the inner reference point that allows a woman to be grounded in the midst of outer chaos, disorder, or ordinary everyday bustle. With Hestia in her personality, a life has meaning. So I'm going to quit here, and then the next video will be about the poems written by women who've been possessed by these archetypes, and for positive and negative ways. Obviously, this description of the way the goddesses behave in patriarchy is very, very different from Charlene Spretnek imaginary description of what people knew about the goddesses in Crete. And again, that's why I think that Hesiod and the other poets understood this, and their descriptions of the way men treat women in patriarchy are not intended to say, well, boys will be boys. They're intended to be cathartic. Hesiod accepts patriarchy, but he really is critical of all the abuses of men when they have power, when they fight among each other, and then in the way they treat women. And he shows how much trouble that creates.